Start late and end late. Are we live here, son? So let me just start out. Today is my anniversary. Thank you. And for 23 years, I have been corrected, as you all just witnessed. So let me just tell you this story. I made this note because I forgot about this, but we got married on June 16th, which in 2001 that was a Saturday. All right, and we did all of our stuff here, and we got married, and we went and we stayed overnight in a hotel. And as I remember, please correct me on this, I woke up and my eyeball looked at the clock in the hotel because it was before smartphones, right? We weren't as connected at that point. I seem to recall that I looked at the clock and it said something like 10. It was probably about this time, 10:54, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, checkout is at 11. We got to be out of here." And so we jumped up and we threw everything in a suitcase, and we got in the car, and we're at the on-ramp at Grove City. We were down at Grove City, and we were getting ready to turn on 79 North, and I sort of took a breath and I looked at the clock in the car, and it said something like 8:50. The clock, if you've ever stayed in a hotel, this is probably not as relevant today, but it used to be whenever I would stay in a hotel, there'd be a clock, but I wouldn't trust it. I'd have to set the alarm the night before to make sure it would go off and all these different things. And this is why I didn't trust alarms in hotels, because sometimes people had the AM PM all screwed up, like you name it. There's all those different challenges. And so now we're driving north on 79. So the day after we were married was Father's Day, and we just came to church. Church was at 9:30 that day, and we were up. And you know who else from my family was at church that morning? Nobody. They all slept in. They all took the day off. So anyway, that's my story from 23 years ago. Let's go ahead and let's get started by just and I just tell you, I feel out of sorts this morning. I wanted a little more prep time. I actually went through and picked up some things in the pews here before we got started, and I'm a little off sorts, but I think it'd be good to get back on track by looking at core values. So let's look at some core values here this morning. We like to start off with the core value of Jesus, and Jesus, we know, always valued people, right? And at Cochranton Community Church, we have 8 core values. Those core values are Bible, worship, service. Something else was said, I didn't catch it though. Stewardship. Relevancy. What are we missing? Community. And in any group, we have our own set of values. In this group, we have 3 values now. One of those values is timeliness. Next value is growth. And our newest is add value to people. Others would be easier to spell, I'll tell you that. So that's where we are. Just a couple things here. Over the next couple weeks, we're going to be looking at some principles of teamwork that we can learn from the Bible. So next week, we're going to look at a principle that's called the big picture. So I'll talk more about that in a minute. Before I go forward, I just want to recognize Sean for stunt doubling for me last week. Thank you. Appreciate you piloting the ship while I was away. Let me just tell you that story real quick. Had the opportunity to go speak at a pharmacy conference in Ocean City, Maryland, which sounds cool, right? It sounds cool until I did the math last night. We left home last Saturday shortly after 8, and we got home, I guess it was this past Monday morning at 1 a.m. So if I did my math correctly, we were gone something like 41 hours. And of those 41 hours, we spent like 21 of them in the car. Like traveling at the beach is not my, well, the beach just isn't my thing in the first place. But Trace is there. She's like, oh, let's go look at the ocean. Done. Okay. You know, I was like, okay, that's it. She's like, I got to get my feet in the ocean. I'm like, more power to you. Anyway, and yeah, about 15 minutes later, I was done. So that's where we are. Teamwork is a concept that goes way, way back, and I want to just unpack this for you a little bit. I feel like I've taught some of these principles to you before, but this idea of teamwork it's a biblical concept, and it goes way, way back to the beginning. So we're going to just jump in here this morning. I'm going to ask those of you who have your Bibles and want to follow along, turn with me to Genesis chapter 2. We're going to start to learn about teamwork in Genesis chapter 2, verses 18, 19, and 20. The story reads, the Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds of the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. Now, we know where the story goes from there. It goes and we see the creation of woman, we see the creation of Eve, because God knew that man needed help. God knew that man needed a teammate, right? We see this very, very on here. Now, for those of you that have your actual Bible in front of you, turn the page. Turn the page. We want to go to Genesis chapter 4. We know what happens in Genesis chapter 3. Things go sideways real quick, right? But when we get to Genesis chapter 4, there's two verses right at the beginning of the chapter, verses 1 and 2, which I want to just draw out the teamwork that we can see here this morning. It reads, Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel. Don't miss this next sentence. Now, Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. This is a verse about teamwork, right? Because what we have here is we have specialization happening. Right? Cain, it said Abel kept flocks, Cain worked the soil. Abel was the shepherd, Cain was the farmer. Why is that? So that they could work together. They needed to work together. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that God made everything and made everyone to work together. And if just as a personal reflection question, if everything, and I mean everything, fell on you to get done, what would that look like for you? Like if it came down to you needed to milk the cow, you needed to churn the butter, you needed to make the bread, you needed to shear the sheep, you needed to darn the socks, you needed to do all those things, like what would life look like? Nobody's making eye contact. Am I speaking a different language here? Like, like we're far removed from that, are we not? Like the idea is God made us with special gifts and talents and abilities, and he said, I want you to go take these things and I want you to be of service to other people. I want you to work in a team. I want you to do these things. And we see this very early on. We see that Cain says, you know what, I'll work the land. Abel says, great, I'm going to take care of the sheep. And between that, now we can make clothes, and now we can have bacon and eggs, right? You know, that's, or I guess this is a little early for bacon and eggs, but you know, that's where we are. He says, I'll get you some fruits and vegetables here, right? That's how it was. So there's an African proverb that I'd be very surprised if you haven't heard this before. I've probably shared this with you before, but it goes something like this. It says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Have a team. Have a team, right? And I think if we look out there, we see some folks that are going it alone, and you know what they're doing? They're going nowhere fast. They go nowhere fast. You see, we were made to do things. We were made to do important things together. Now, my interest and my emphasis on teamwork at this time is because we're heading into Camp for Kids, right? And just out of curiosity, who all is involved in Camp for Kids this year? Oh, wow. Wow, look at all those hands. There's a lot of folks that are involved. And it's become a pretty big operation over the years, has it not? You know, here's the thing about Camp for Kids. We can look at this as sort of like the finish line, or like some type of Super Bowl that, hey, we're working up to this, and whenever it's all done, we're going to be all excited about it. But we can also look at it as say, you know what, this is actually a launch point for what it is for us to move forward from. Those of you who were baptized today, or we saw folks get baptized this morning, right? It's easy for people to say, oh, that's some type of finish line, but I'm going to tell you, it's not a finish line, it's actually the starting line. Starting line for what you're going to do going forward. And it's a key thing for us to understand. Now, one of the things that we have studied in this class over the last, whatever it's been, 10 months, or actually the last couple of years, is I like to do a study of God's laws. And whenever I do those laws, generally speaking, I like to look at, give myself a little bit of room here. I like to look at God's laws, but I spell law with a lowercase l, right? When you think of God's law, a lot of people they'll think of the Ten Commandments, or you know the law, and you'll see this, the law of Moses. Oftentimes that'll be capitalized in your Bible. I am fascinated with God's laws with the little l. Right? These are the principles that God made that govern everything that we see happen around us. And I often will use like the law of gravity. Or the law of rhythm, or something like that, you know, and talk about, you know, have you ever fallen up? You know, if I let go of the marker, is it going to fall down, or is it going to fall up? It's going to fall down because of the law of gravity, right? You've been alive, however many days or years you've been alive. How many days or how many days have you gone through that have been not 24 hours? They're all 24 hours. Right? That's God's law. Those are the things. And I just love studying those things. And, you know, we've looked at laws of leadership. We've looked at laws of growth. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to look at laws of teamwork that we can find illustrated in Scripture. Now, I tell you that, the handbook that I'm using for this is a book titled The 17 Laws of Teamwork by John Maxwell. We're not going to go through all 17 over the next couple of weeks. Maybe over the next several months we'll go through those. But we're going to go through a couple. Whether you realize it or not, we've already done the first one. The first law is the law of significance. And we first studied this law. I was wanting to study it a couple of weeks ago, then I realized I already taught the law of significance way back in November. So if you want to go back and watch that, you're welcome to go back and watch that. That's recorded. But the law of significance states that one is too small a number to achieve greatness. And if you think about that, we see that illustrated all over the place. When big things are done, it's because people come together. Right? Even Jesus said, you know what, I need a team to make what I'm doing here work. And he brought his disciples together. Right? That's how it works. A couple of weeks ago, I wanted to talk about significance, and I had to adjust it a little bit to say, you know what, we have to do significant things if we're going to be successful in the things that we're doing. Significance precedes success, right? That was the premise that we looked at a couple of weeks ago. Now, as we head into Camp for Kids, and I believe we're about a month out, I believe Camp for Kids typically falls on the week of the teens, whatever the week of that teens is in July. And so we're not too far away from that. And so while you know, you can look at that and it can be nice and neat on a piece of paper to say, oh, it's coming up and it's all hunky-dory like that. It would be a disservice to our value of growth, which I erased here. So we're going to go a little more methodically through a couple of these leadership laws. And so today we're going to look at the law of Mount Everest. Any of you mountain climbers? Any of you know anybody who has climbed a mountain? Has anybody walked outside? Let's take it back a couple of. There we go. We got a couple. I was telling a story about, who was I telling? I was telling somebody a story about you, Josh, about how you take your kids on boat rides through the field. And I just thought that was really, Dan, I was telling you. I was like, hey, you know what? There's different things. But, you know, there's some people that say, you know what? I want to go climb a mountain. And that hasn't hit me. I mean, I'd probably rather go to the beach. You think about it. I hadn't really given it a whole lot of thought, but yeah, I'm more likely to say let's go to the beach and let's go climb Mount Everest. But I'm going to tell you, I had, now let me give you the definition of the law before I go on and tell you more. The law of Mount Everest states that as the challenge escalates, escalates, I don't know if I'm spelling that right, the need for teamwork elevates, right? So as projects get bigger, as projects get a little more complex, what it tells us is the law of Mount Everest says that we really need to have more teamwork. We need to have more teamwork. We need to have more people in. Escalates is apparently with an S, not X. Escalates. So I would tell you I knew very little about, actually I would tell you most of what I know about mountain climbing comes from playing a board game titled Oh What a Mountain. Anybody remember the board game Oh What a Mountain? Nobody remembers. Wow, that's got to be big 80s. Scott, you don't remember Oh What a Mountain? Somebody go on eBay and look it up, right? You know, it was a three-dimensional game board, and you had the flat part on the table, and then it made a mountain, and you would roll and you'd move your man along, and there'd be different things, but then like rocks would fall and it could knock your man off the mountain, and then you'd have to start over, right? You know, just. Oh yeah, you don't want him to fall. Well, I'll tell you, I was at a pharmacy conference and I had a guy come out. The guy's name is Chris Warner, and this is a guy who has climbed mountains. He has climbed Mount Everest, which is the world's tallest mountain, but he has also climbed the mountain known as K2, and K2 is the world's deadliest mountain. That more people die on K2 than die on Mount Everest. And he taught me all sorts of things, like it gets so cold as you go up that you have to keep moving. And you can go look this. You can look for Frozen Man on Mount Everest. You can see this guy like in ski gear who stopped moving and he froze to death. And there's no bacteria up there, so he's not decomposed and he's perfectly preserved somewhere up towards the top of the mountain. Let me make sure I don't miss some of my notes here. But you see, because of that ridiculous board game, or because of The Price is Right, Scott, thank you for that example, you can sort of think that, mountain climbing, no big deal. But it can be a very deadly endeavor. Chris was telling me about how you can slip on a mountain and you can literally fall off of it. And when you play the board game, you just go back to start. But he told the story of walking into base camp, and he heard a scream, and a man fell out of the sky and hit the ground, and it was instantly dead. Like all the bones in his body were crushed. He had fallen from such a height. And I had not taken that into consideration, which only would fuel my lack of interest in climbing a mountain. Like I'm soft like that, I rode around on the riding lawnmower, and man, I'm whooped after riding around in circles all day, right? But he was telling that story. He was saying he was on this team, but the team was ill prepared, and they were just trying to force their way through. And they got there, and they heard the scream, and the man falls out of the sky, and there's no CPR that's going to save this guy. Like he's done. Like nobody, like yawn. This happens all the time. And I was just fascinated by that. But he said when that man fell out of the sky, he said we're not prepared enough, and he turned around and he went home. It was part of it. If you want to read his stories, he has a book titled, I believe it's titled High Altitude Leadership. Feel free to check it out, or maybe you can find somebody that will read it on YouTube or something. But it was just, he told a lot of interesting stories. But one of the things that I took from him was just the importance of teamwork. And teamwork is important everywhere. Whether you're celebrating a wedding anniversary, as Trace and I are today, whether you're climbing a mountain, whether you're putting on a camp that's going to win souls for Jesus, whatever it is, teamwork is so important. And God wasted no time in making sure we knew of the importance of teamwork by giving that to us in the first couple chapters of the Bible. So of late, I would tell you, now when I first started thinking about, I'm going to do these teamwork principles, I thought I was going to do a lot of camping in the book of Nehemiah, and we could do that. Whenever we look at these principles, you can easily go to Nehemiah, read the story of Nehemiah, and you can say, right there it is. I see it at work. But I've been really fascinated of late by the story of Moses. Moses has been teaching me quite a bit of late. So we're going to look at a story of Moses here today and learn a little more about teamwork. Now, just to help you place this story, if I asked you to tell me what you know about Moses, you could be like, well, he led the Israelites out of Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea. They go and they get the 10 Commandments. They don't do what they're told, and they wander around in the wilderness for 40 years. We would agree that would be an accurate story. But there's a story that I want to look at today, that we can see some teamwork in. But this takes place between when they cross the Red Sea, so they're on the other side of the Red Sea, but before they get to Mount Sinai to get the law, to get the 10 Commandments, all right? And I've heard this story before. Chances are you've heard this story before, but I don't know that I ever realized exactly where it was placed in the story. So if you want to turn with me to Exodus chapter 17, we're going to look at verses 8 through 13. And it's this conflict, it's this confrontation that's happening between the Israelites and the Amalekites, okay? So Exodus 17, starting with verse 8. It reads, "The Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, 'Choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands.' So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. And whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady until sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this on, or maybe I went too far. Did I go too far with that? I think I went too. I think we can stop there at verse 13. Yeah, we'll stop there. So let's take a moment here. If you, and I'm not taking that anybody here is going to make this decision, but let's just say that you made the decision that you wanted to climb Mount Everest. You would say that this is going to have a little bit of, this is not going to be a leisurely stroll around the park, right? This is going to take some effort. It's going to take some, it's going to take some preparation. It's going to take a number of things for this to work out. And similarly, leading the Israelites out of Egypt is not something that you would just throw together in an afternoon. It's not like Moses sat down and said, you know what, I got this plan, and this is what we're going to do. And like it didn't happen like that. It took a lot for that all to come together. Now, Moses had this plan, but as he was going through this plan, his plan did not account for somebody coming along and attacking him. Right? So now we have the Amalekites coming and attacking the Israelites. And there's a few things that I think we can learn about teamwork from this story of Moses. The first thing, how are we doing on time? The first thing that I think we can look at is the importance of leadership and support. If you're going to have a team, you're going to have somebody that's going to lead that team to where you're going. If you have a team and you don't have a leader, you're not going to go anywhere, right? But not only do you have that, you have people that are playing supportive roles in this. Leadership is crucial in challenging situation, but leaders also need support because leaders can't know it all. That's something that I hope we've picked up over our study of leadership over the last several months and years. It's that we need people to come alongside us to help us do these things. So Moses' leadership was vital, but he didn't do it alone, right? He had Aaron and he had Aaron and Hur on either side to help him hold his arms up, and he had support from Joshua out on the battlefield, right? We can see that. The second thing that we can learn from this is the interdependence of team members. People had to rely on each other. Success depends on the interdependence and cooperation of everybody on the team. What would have happened if Aaron was holding up one arm but Hur did not? We don't know, right? But I would suggest when we're told that when Moses' arms came down, the Israelites didn't do so well. But if we didn't have Joshua leading the troops out on the battlefield, those are all necessary things. The Israelites' victory depended on Moses holding up the staff and the soldiers fighting the battle. Everybody involved played a crucial role, demonstrating that every team member's contribution is essential. Everybody plays a role on this. Third thing we can learn about teamwork is around endurance and, what was my next thing? And persistence. And we've looked at persistence a few times over the years, but we're going to put endurance with it today. We need to have endurance and persistence to overcome significant challenges. Right? When resistance comes, if you don't have that endurance, if you don't have that persistence, you just fade and go away. Right? You got to have some stick-to-itiveness to keep going through this. Moses had to keep his hand raised for the duration of the battle. His perseverance, supported by Aaron and Hur, underscores the need for sustained effort and mutual encouragement within a team. right? We need to have people that'll stick together. We can look about and we can learn about the power of unity. We've talked about unity before, right? How Jesus wanted us to be united. And whenever we have this unity within the team, we can achieve things that individuals would not be able to do on their own. The combined efforts of Moses, Aaron, Hur, and the soldiers brought victory. And so we have that as a necessary thing. And then the last thing that I want to call out from this particular lesson, or from this particular story, is the importance of strategic planning, right? They have a certain number of resources. What do they do with those resources? How is it that we're going to do these things? We have to delegate and use our resources appropriately. Now, I think we will agree that leading the Israelites or climbing Mount Everest or organizing Camp for Kids would probably fall into some type of bucket of a major operation, right? Its significance. So don't lose sight of the fact that we all have. We can look at these big things on the outside, but we all have Mount Everest in our own lives, right? We've got things that we're going through. We have our own mountains that we need to climb. And if we have mountains that we need to climb, that means we need to have teams that support us to make that happen. So, a couple of questions for you to consider. What is your Mount Everest? What mountains are you climbing right now? Or what mountains are you facing right now? Some of you may have dreams that you're working towards. You may have projects that you're working towards. And chances are some of the things that are on your heart are bigger than what you can do on your own. Right? You have those things. And if you have something that's bigger than what you can do on your own, you need help. You need a team. You need people to come around you to help that happen. So that's one question, is what is your Everest? The second one is, who do you have on your team? Who's helping you get there, right? And the size of your team is going to determine how well you're going to be able to overcome that obstacle. A bigger team is going to allow you to do bigger things. It's going to allow you to climb higher mountains, right? I'm not sure that anyone would have dreamed 30 some odd years ago when they started Camp for Kids that it would be as big as what it is today. I think that there's folks involved in it now that are still sort of baffled every year that it's as big as it is. But I would ask you this: what do you think the people running it 30 years from now are going to say? Something to consider, right? What's it going to look like 30 years from now? And I don't have any idea what it was, but I'm going to tell you what it's going to look like 30 years from now is going to depend on the team that is making it happen. With whatever mountain you're looking to climb, you need a team. And if you don't have a team, then you're going to find yourself in a miserable situation. You're going to find yourself in a very miserable situation. We see in this passage from Exodus that Moses had a team. He had Aaron, he had Hur, he had Joshua, he had these folks that were right there next to him. And so you need to ask yourself, what all do I need, or who all do I need on my team to be able to make this, to be able to climb this mountain? Now, here's the secret for it all. When you focus on building your team, whatever mountain it is that you're trying to climb becomes easier. Always focus on building the team, right? I have this note here of a lesson that I'm thinking about teaching, and all I have written down is who's and what's. And maybe this is I'll give you the preview of this lesson. There's a lot of people who think that there is some what, that if I just had this what, everything in life would be better. Like, it's Father's Day. I'm thinking, wouldn't it be great if I had a 90-inch TV to watch the NBA Finals in tonight? I think that would be great. That's a what. And there's a lot of people that if I had a fast car, if I had a pool, if I had kids that did chores, I have one that does chores, she's reacting. The other two struggle a little bit with this. They take a little more prompting from time to time. But here's the thing, like we fall into this trap of what? Oh, if I had fill in the blank, and oftentimes but the way God made us is that it's whose. God made us for whose. That there's whose that come into your life at different times that take you to the next level. There's people that you meet that unlock the next phase of your life. It's a teacher that comes along. It's somebody that comes alongside you and it helps pick you up. You name it. But whose are more often than what's what we need, if that makes sense. And so as you're looking to do whatever, there's a lot of, well, if I had these tools, I'd be able to climb this mountain a lot easier. But you know what? If you had the right who, climbing the mountain may become so much easier. Like I was telling you about this guy that I listened to him teach. His name was Chris. I could say, you know what? I could get some gear and we could go climb Mount Everest together. And Chris would be able to tell you, you don't need some of that gear, but I'll go with you. And you would quickly go with Chris to climb the mountain. You wouldn't say, I wouldn't care what type of ropes you have or what type of shoes or spikes or pickaxes or whatever it is, right? He's like, I know the way. Right, there's that's what we need. So there's maybe I'll cross who's and what's off, or I'll put that lower on the list. But just know that there's who's are so important to us. They're so important to our teams. And when we focus on those people on our teams, things become so much easier, and that becomes counterintuitive. Right? There's often times we think if we had the what's, it would be so much better, but it's more often than not, it's the who's. So we need to understand that building our team is so important. And there's people who are very, very close to us on the team. Now, I did a lesson in April of last year on the inner circle, right? There's a group of people that you have closest to you. Right? And we see in the story of Moses here that he had a couple of folks close to him. He had Aaron and Hur and Joshua. But if you turn to the New Testament, you can find that Jesus had some people that were close to him. He had his disciples, but he had Peter and John and James who were extra close to him. That we have these, we need these folks that are close to us. Now, you may or may not have a team like that around you right now. If not, this is your invitation to start. Who is on that team? Who are those folks who are close to you? If you don't have one, start one. Ask some people to help. And when you do this, just understand that you're going to get a wide range of help. You're going to get some help that's really good. You're going to get some help that's really bad. You're going to get some help that's very specific, some that's pretty general, right? But once you have your team, I want to give you a little bit of a formula here to consider. Once you have your team, I'm going to give you, I guess I have 4 things here for you to consider. Number 1, develop them. Work with your team. Help them get better. Point them in the right directions. Help them to define and refine their skills. Don't let people on your team stay where they are. Don't say, oh, good enough where you're at right now. Just coast. No, develop them. Help them get better. You want to help people improve. You want to help people get better. And I'm going to tell you, it's so fun to watch people improve. It's so much fun to watch people get better and to improve their talents and competencies. But as you do this, you're going to be going along, and you're going to have this mountain that you're looking to climb, and you're going to say, well, these are the pieces that I have, and you're going to notice that I've got some things missing. So you develop the people that you have, and then you need to look to add people, right? You're going to need to add specific people to your team. You're going to say, you know what, we've got this great mountain climbing team, but nobody knows how to cook. I need somebody to cook so we can have our nutrition to make it all the way to the top, right? And maybe that's a little too simplistic, but I use that as an example. You'll need to look for specific people and skills that will elevate your team. And as you do this, then other things that you have to do is there's times when you need to adjust leadership. Right? You can be in charge of the expedition, but there's going to be times that you're going to have to say, you know what? You lead us through this next phase. You have the skills to do it. You're going to do a much better job at this than what I do. So you have to adjust your leadership as you go through a particular challenge, right? During certain objectives or seasons, you may need to adjust leadership and put someone else in charge for a certain time or for a specific project to most effectively and efficiently navigate a particular event. And this one's going to hurt. This is the last one I have for you. But number 4 is to remove ineffective members. And this is going to sound harsh, I know that. Ineffective members. Right? This is something that I learned from the mountain climber that I hadn't taken into consideration. He said, as you go higher on the mountain, the air gets thinner. It gets colder. He's like, there's days where you'll only ascend, maybe a couple dozen feet. And he said, what you need to do is you need to take with you as little as possible. So you could have all this gear on you at the bottom of the mountain, but as you go up the mountain, you're leaving gear behind. You're only taking what's essential to take you to that next step. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Like, you get to a certain point and you say, all right, here's my tent. This is where I'm staying for the night. If you're going to go all the way to the peak, you're not going to pack your tent up and take it back up and then bring it back down. You leave it behind, right? Because each step is so challenging and so exhausting along the way. We have to be aware of ineffective team members, and you've got to be ready to leave them behind. You've got to be ready to leave ineffective team members behind. And, I don't have this, we're not going to read the story, but there's the story of Moses sending the 12 spies into the promised land, right? I'm going to tell you 2 of those spies were effective and 10 of them were not. And when they listened to the ineffective members, what happened? It ruined the dream for a generation. It ruined the dream for a generation of Israelites because they listened, they had ineffective people in those roles. Don't miss that. That's such an important thing for us to understand, that they poisoned the faith of the people of a generation, and that generation lost the promise. So, a final thought here. What I've done here today is I've given you the law of Mount Everest, and you can look at this from the leader perspective, right? You can say, well, I know I need to find people on my team. I'm going to need to add some people. I'm going to have to adjust my leadership, and I'm going to have to get rid of some folks. But I also want you to look at this law of teamwork from a team member. And I'm going to put it over here, member. And I want to invite you. Are you being developed? Who is developing you? Are you developable? That's probably not a word. A variation of that is, are you coachable? Are you coachable? Because I'm going to tell you, if you're not, you're going to find yourself ineffective. You're going to find yourself ineffective at some point, right? So I want to encourage you to be open to development. I want you to be open to having new people join the team and to welcoming them, right? Not everybody's like that. Not everybody's a good teammate. But some people. I've been watching these Lakers documentaries. I love the drama and I love the train wreck. And I don't know if it's necessarily in that order, but you'd see this. You would see a new player comes to town, and people become very, very selfish. They become very, very territorial. And for us to climb the mountain, you got to get over that. When new people come along, we got to welcome them. We got to welcome them in. We need to understand that there's going to be adjustments in leaderships, and we may have our time and we may not have our time. We may have to surrender certain things to other people who would be more effective with that. And we also need to understand that when our time has come, when we are no longer effective in a particular role, that it may be best for us to get out of the way. And don't be that weight on the team that would prevent people from reaching that particular goal. Let me just look here at my notes real quick. If you're on a team, be coachable to develop your skills. Look for people with skills that will enhance the mission. Support changes in leadership, even if temporary, and if the time is right. And remove yourself if you are not contributing to the goal. This is the law of Mount Everest. The law of Mount Everest, again, says that as the challenge escalates, the need for teamwork elevates. And we all have different mountains in front of us for us to scale. So with that, I'm going to put my 3 letters on the board here at the top, right? ACT. Based on what you have learned today, what action will you take? What change will you make? And is there something that you learned today that you can teach to somebody else for your sake and theirs?